This is a textbook operation that Nazis used, and they've used it over and over again.
Zimbabwe's land reform program changed the farming landscape, breaking up large commercial farms and handing land to thousands of smallholder farmers. More than 80,000 of them have taken up tobacco, helping propel it back to the country's top export. Conducive weather and geography, as well as low access costs, have contributed to their success.
Sanbonani Africa, and a warm welcome to the alternative view with the one and only Andile Gogoletsi Ntombi yakwaCindu Mahlaba eMinaloyo. Thank you so much for tuning in and showing so much support. As always, the show is about giving you the platform to voice out your own opinions without criticism nor judgment. Now, the Gold Mafia documentary became televised on the Al-Jazeera channel without the government's acknowledgement, none whatsoever. Now, the question we need to ask ourselves is, who is Al-Jazeera? Why was the issue not taken to the upper hand, the Zimbabwean government or the state security, before televising the whole document? And listen.
Pay attention, please.
Hey, shut up and listen.
This nonsensical documentary, a racist propaganda tool that is set to create despondency in Zimbabwe. The American gold or British gold is Zimbabwean gold. They have a right to sell their gold anywhere. In fact, I encourage Mnangagwa, bust the sanctions. Bust the sanctions, Mnangagwa. And feed your people. This is not the gold for friends. This gold belongs to the people of Zimbabwe. And therefore they have the right to sell it. Who are you? Just small rat around here, telling people stupidity. Yeah? Don't, this gold belongs to the people of Zimbabwe. The Zimbabwe people have a right to sell their gold. You don't give them conditions. Who are you? Who are you? You have told them not to sell your gold. Now, if they are smuggling their gold, it's their gold. Al-Jazeera, what have you got to do with it? Shame. What type of journalism? Stupidity. Stupid. Al-Jazeera, what have you got to do with it? Shame. What type of journalism? Stupidity. Stupid.
We believe that Zimbabwe should not be a part of the international financial system. That means that they can't transact in dollars.
When President Mugabe gave land out to the people of Zimbabwe, I was a member of the Central Executive of the Labour Party in London, where I have been in exile to date. I'm still a member of the Central Executive Party Council of the Labour Party.
With meaningful and tangible developments taking place all over Zimbabwe, from road infrastructure, dam construction, hydropower developments, housing, and the magnificent cyber city being built under the new dispensation under the leadership of His Excellency Emmerson Mnangagwa, the betterment of Zimbabwe and its people under brutal sanctions that have rocked the Southern African country for the past 22 years.
In 2008, hyperinflation ravages Zimbabwe's economy.
Lavish villas, luxury townhouses, high-tech offices, landscaped gardens, and a 15-story commercial tower. These aren't the plans for the latest building development in Dubai, but for a city in the suburbs of Harare, the capital of Zimbabwe. President Emmerson Mnangagwa says his government and investors are confident in its potential.
Zimbabwe is rebuilding brick by brick. We ask ourselves, how is that possible? And is Zimbabwe as a country, is it not meant to prosper and do whatever it desires on its own God-given natural resources, including selling its own gold? The West, especially America and the British government, have tried to control the southern nation's destiny. Hence, we see many Zimbabweans leaving their beloved land in search of a better life in countries such as South Africa. Let's take a look at what President Mnangagwa had to say as a reason why he feels his country is under consistent pressure and victimization from the West.
Kapiwa ufumi pasi apa. Ndio nhame yatinayo muchiona tichitambudzwa nevachena. Vanoziva zviri muno munyika medu. Ndo zvavanoda. Ndo zviri titambudziwe.
The revolution shall be televised. JIT-TV.
Nyika inovakwa nevanhu vayo. As the president said, brick by brick.
Now, the Gold Mafia documentary has been broadly televised on Al-Jazeera and other mainstream media channels that have run with the documentary. As fact, this has gone most people talking and expressing their views without the government's acknowledgement or being informed of the findings or outcomes of the above, or being informed of the intentions of the above or undertakings of the so-called Gold Mafia documentary being carried out in its territory.
We're in a lot of trouble when the largest company in the world controls the most awesome goddamn propaganda force in the whole godless world. Who knows what shit will be peddled for truth on this network?
Now, who owns Al Jazeera? Al Jazeera was founded by two brothers, but over years, many countries have expressed their views and have been accused of misleading and adding or staging misinformation. So what's your view? Or is it the art of media deception? As we unpack this issue, we ask ourselves, why was the government not informed or security agents not notified? Televising the documentary before engaging or informing the authorities or involve government in getting assistance in bringing the so-called gold mafias to book does raise a number of questions and motive of the producer and its alliance.
Would have ignored all the evidence that would point to the truth.
This is the alternative view. The above story doing the rounds on Al Jazeera, a carefully structured program with part 1 to part 4 to keep you, the viewer, captivated, has hit high record audience ratings.
He is a sort of gangster, you know, because this is a gangster story, but a gangster with a difference because this is a gangster with a conscience.
This mafia-style embedded journalism is of great concern, one that borders on the breach of the broadcasting ethic code and conduct, one that is borderline abuse of journalism rights and privileges.
And his gold leaf mafia breaks sanctions on behalf of the Reserve Bank.
Simon Redland has got a special deal.
What they do is, once if they get the gold, they get the escort all the way to the airport.
They've got 3 to 5 people taking the shit out of the country.
They carry gold.
They give him the gold. He has a contract to move from Fidelity to Dubai.
They do rotations.
National key point areas were breached, putting a huge risk to the security of the people of Zimbabwe, and we question and ask where the state's security, and they too need to be held accountable for putting the life of the president at risk in the airports and all key points seen in the documentary.
I've been working at the airport for the last 23 years. I've been helping people to move gold. I've been helping people to move money. I've been helping people to, to move diamonds.
Moses describes how Rutland and his gold leaf mafia break sanctions on behalf of the Reserve Bank.
The question that begs answers: were these so-called mafia journalists accredited to work and operate at will in Zimbabwe by the Ministry of Information? Here on The View, we have done our own research and have in on good account as to the motive and who funded the above poorly conducted documentary. Now, these are some of the questions the public at large had to ask Al Jazeera. If at any point did it actually notify the Zimbabwean government or state security of embedded journalists working and operating in Zimbabwe? Is the documentary meant to create voter dissent towards ZANU-PF and the government of Zimbabwe? Does it have any relationship with the British government PR company known for creating disinformation for purposes of a regime change agenda? What is Al Jazeera's understanding of a mafia, and has Al Jazeera turned a blind eye to the illegal sanctions mafias kill? Has anyone been killed by these so-called mafias? Why was CCC BET opposition CNR leader interviewed in Al Jazeera documentary and not the Zimbabwe Minister of Finance? This begs the question again, was this not a Western-founded regime change agenda? A week after visiting London, and why was his camera position set and properly positioned? Why was no top government official not interviewed? Burning questions indeed from members of the end and on most social media platforms. History reminds us Zimbabwe was once a British colony, and back the British looted Zim gold, and the Queen even owned a gold mine in Zimbabwe. They had the power to control the Zimbabwean economy and its natural resources under the British South African Company. To them, Zimbabwe was not a country, but a company. So clearly, this gives good reason why it is still in war with Zimbabwe. Reason being, it knows how wealthy the country is. And if it wasn't the sanctions imposed by the US, the West of Zimbabwe could have been the best country, the best successful country, if not the first, maybe the second successful country, or rated as one of the richest.
Zimbabwe, Nyika Yakanaka. Zimbabwe is a landlocked country between the Zambezi and Limpopo rivers, surrounded by SADC countries like South Africa, Botswana, Zambia, and Mozambique. The name Zimbabwe stems from a Shona term for Great Zimbabwe. It's the ruins of an ancient city dating back to between the 11th and 15th centuries, are made entirely of stone and span over 1,800 acres. Ask us about arranging a visit here. The highlands are known for their natural environment, with tourist destinations such as Nyanga, Chimanimani, Vumba, and Chirinda Forest at Mount Selinda. Victoria Falls, one of the 7 wonders and one of the world's biggest and most spectacular waterfalls, is located in the country's extreme northwest and is part of the Zambezi River. The Victoria Falls National Park is also in this area and is one of the 8 main national parks in Zimbabwe, the largest of which is Hwange National Park. Matobo Hills National Park is one of the country's most interesting parks from a cultural perspective. It's not only very scenic, it also has a rich human history. Once inhabited by Bushmen, there's a superb collection of well-preserved rock art dating back at least 13,000 years. Lake Kariba is one of the biggest man lakes that is famous for the mystical creature Nyami Nyami and is a popular African travel destination. Zimbabwe is showing a steady growth path economically according to the World Bank review. This is a significant improvement after a 2-year recession due to COVID-19 and other factors. Zimbabwe's agriculture has taken its status of being the breadbasket of Africa, with its land reform program showing phenomenal signs of growth and yields produced by Zimbabweans for Zimbabweans. Land is certainly a good story to tell. Zimbabwe is now the fastest growing third world country in Africa and the world at large. Zimbabwe, Musha Wakanaka. Zimbabwe is blessed with amazing fauna and flora, minerals, and many natural resources. It is one of the world's biggest producers of gold and the 3rd biggest producers of platinum. The mining sector remains very lucrative, with some of the world's largest platinum reserves being mined. The Marange diamond fields, discovered in 2006, are considered the biggest diamond find in over a century. So if you need a world-class African country to do business while touring this majestic landscape and seeing the Big 5, Zimbabwe is the destination of choice. Zimbabwe,
One can say that US and British had some sort of union, or rather let me say the West, regarding Zimbabwe's natural resources that would bring Zimbabwe's prosperity. Henceforth, they tried and are still trying to bring Zimbabwe down in order to reclaim country's resources. Which now brings me to this question. Does Britain still want to colonize Zimbabwe again? Why is this all coming up just days before the primary elections and 3 months away from a general election? Let us have a look at a video of Ricky Dolan explaining why he said what he said on Gold Mafia. Let us please listen to his response.
Zimbabwe, you've been wrongfully given painful sanctions. They want to control where and who you sell your gold to, and the rest of your produce too, and even the price thereof. Please wake up to the reality and the real scam that's taking place here.
Individuals interviewed have made press releases, and that includes Pastor Hubert Angel. Now this makes it more questionable for Al-Jazeera. Have they really done their research and dig much into accusations that were made? And to get deep, the sinister motive was to character assassinate Hubert Angel, making the whole documentary a gimmick with regards to the sanctions. Truth be told, the United States and Europe nation sanctions against Zimbabwe were illegal and unjustified, as they violated Article 41 of the United Nations Charter, which states that sanctions can only be decided on by the UN Security Council. The overall impact of the sanctions on Zimbabwe was that it lost well over $42 billion in revenue over the past 19 years. This includes most donor support estimated at $4.5 billion annually since 2001. $12 billion in loans from the International Monetary African Development Bank, commercial loans of $18 billion and a GDP reduction of $21 billion. As a consequence, the significant progress that Zimbabwe had made in the development of infrastructure, as well as health, education, and other social service delivery systems has been severely reversed. This has resulted in the most vulnerable sections of the population sinking deeper and deeper into poverty. Seems as though the US wanted to captivate, or rather take control of other countries. Zimbabwe is not the only one. Russia has a buyer of oil, and that is Japan. Japan is a close ally of the US, and now the same Japan has decided to buy Russian oil, which the US did not expect at all. A big win for Russia and a big blow for the West. Here's a video explaining everything in detail, which will give you much clarity
like a modern
of the
day
United
Tsar
States
in a
not
suit.
wanting
Vladimir
any country
Putin
to be
arrived
independent,
at the Grand Kremlin Palace.
but rather keeping them under their wing.
This move demonstrates what the world has always known, that Western sanctions regime is hollow. Quick question. Why does Japan need Russian oil? Because it's cheap and it's available. It ensures Japan's energy security. Japan needs oil, but it does not produce any fossil fuel. 90% of what Japan consumes is imported, so energy imports are crucial for Tokyo, and you cannot depend on just one source. So Japan is turning to Russia for oil. It is pursuing an independent policy. Now here's the interesting part. Japan is part of the G7, the group of 7, the world's 7 largest economies. And this group, the G7, wanted to cap Russian oil prices. They wanted to set a limit to Russian oil prices. The G7, the European Union, and Australia were all part of this effort. They wanted to fix Russian oil prices at $60 a barrel, so that Russia is not able to sell oil at high prices. The idea was to limit its earnings from oil. $60 a barrel, that was it. But Japan did not join this effort. It sought an exemption, and it got one. With this, Japan was able to buy more Russian energy. Now look at the numbers. In the first 60 days of this year, Japan bought close to 750,000 barrels of Russian oil. How much did Tokyo pay for this? About $52 million. That comes to under $70 per barrel, but that's more than the Western price cap of $60 per barrel. And this is not a one-off case.
But however, tables have turned. Dollar dominance is being challenged as the currency of global trade. Sanctions have boomeranged back on the US and the European Union countries with inflation.
dollar dominance is being challenged as the currency of global trade. Yes, it's really happening. Sanctions have boomeranged back on the U.S. and the European Union countries with inflation, supply chain shortages, a looming recession causing hardships at home. And the U.S. response is doubling down on harsher sanctions and expanding war. The global south, the countries of Africa, Latin America, and most countries of Asia, the formerly colonized world, are no longer complying with the thousands of U.S. and European nations' sanctions that were imposed. And that is a new day. This is a big change. It's happening especially with the sanctions on Russia and China, but you can see it with the trade with Iran and Venezuela, with the constant exchanges now with Syria, with whole new agreements being, the ability of the U.S. to create economic chaos, it's just not succeeding. Now, it is a real struggle. The U.S. response is wider war, more threats, voting tens of billions of dollars for more weapons, firing missiles hundreds of miles, even into Russia. Aircraft carriers are almost daily patrolling the Straits of Taiwan. They have what they call decapitation military drills against North Korea. No lie, that's the word they use. So all of this is wildly dangerous, but it's a sign of U.S. imperialist decay, the erosion of its power, the ability of many countries to find ways to connect with each other, to use new currency, despite the power of the U.S. dollar. You can see it now in all the different, it's a new period. And the tribunal is part of this new period. Really, this is how we should see it and own it and embrace it. The sanctioned countries have not collapsed. There's new trade agreements, new levels of cooperation, BRICS, Belt and Road, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. China with socialist development is an alternative. This is no longer a unipolar world.
Supply chain shortages, a looming recession causing hardships at home, and the U.S. response is doubling down on harsher sanctions and expanding war. The global south, the countries of Africa, and most countries of Asia, the formerly colonized world, are now no longer complying with the thousands of U.S. and European nation sanctions that were imposed. The ability of the U.S. to create economic chaos, it's just not succeeding anymore. This is no different to what the IMF is doing, trying to bully Zimbabwe by telling it to get rid of their gold coins. Here are some of the comments from Twitter about the IMF. We first have a tweet from Millers, and it says, IMF and the World Bank hasn't done anything tangible for Zimbabwe in recent times, and the USA has imposed sanctions. Till these illegal sanctions are lifted and full reparation to be impoverished people of Zimbabwe, there is absolutely no prerogative to take any advice from IMF. Next, we have from Anti-Puppet Citizen tweet, and it says, I love it when a government asserts its power. We stand in queues to vote them into power. We want them to stand up to these other unelected powers. God bless the Zim government. We don't expect them to cross the floor to the other side with our votes. And the last one that we have, it comes from Joseph Aferi 442, and it says, IMF is NATO. Why do they always want to tell us what to do? Gold money is powerful than the dollar. That is why they're always preventing the United States from Africa. They're always making our leaders to think of themselves but not the people in the country. Nikita Findings is that Zimbabwe is selling its gold through smart sanctions, busting tactics, which cannot be classified as gold smuggling. Though some other people may see it as illegal, but what other choice does Zimbabwe has? I mean, the West are determined to shut down all relations created by Zimbabwe in order for the country not to be independent, but be dependent on them. Here's a statement that we have found to be very interesting by Mr. Rutendo Madinyarare.
The revolution shall be televised.
It's the government of Zimbabwe. So you've got to be willing to do what those other people like Rutland are doing. They bring in their money, the government doesn't have money. They go and buy, as I said. They get charged by the miners.
Yeah.
They pay the miners. Cash upfront.
Yeah.
They bring their gold. They refine the gold. They pay for the refinery.
Yes.
And then they take the product overseas. All on their own risk. Government of Zimbabwe is incurring no risk, but it receives the tax.
Sure.
It receives the processing and refinery costs.
Sure.
So where is it that the stealing happens? Because the miner is not a slave.
Sure.
He works for himself. He doesn't work for a company.
Yeah.
He wants his money up front.
Okay.
And anybody will give him that money. So if Rutland won't give him that money, someone else will come and give him that money.
Mr. Rutendo is a prolific marketing strategist specialist in branding, digital and offline marketing from Frontline Strat Marketing. Smuggling of gold has been a problem for Zimbabwe for many years. The country is rich in minerals, including gold, and it is estimated that a significant amount of Zimbabwean gold is smuggled out of the country, which means that the government is missing out on revenue that could be used for development projects. However, it is important to note that the majority of Zimbabwean gold exports reach the market through legitimate channels and contribute positively to the economy. The Al-Jazeera documentary highlighted the illegal activities of certain individuals and groups involved in smuggling gold out of the country. However, it sought to tar the entire industry with the same brush, which is misrepresentation, if not disinformation. Now, just for clarity, number one, Zimbabwe increased its gold production by 617.6% from 4.9 tons in 2008 during near collapse of our economy due to illegal sanctions to 36.38 tons in 2022. The growth has been achieved through the legalization and participation of artisanal miners, legitimate investment in artisanal mining, licensed buyers purchasing gold at fair price from the miners, submitting the gold to Fidelity for refining before exporting it legally. This constitutes Zimbabwe's legitimate gold rush economy, which has helped the government manage COVID without debt, removed Zimbabwe from the list of nations most vulnerable to TB, and enabled the government to spend $25 million of its own money without debt. Additionally, the proceeds of gold and other resources have aided Zimbabwe in building roads, dams, bridges, and schools without loans. Anything outside of this illegal process of selling gold, allocated to by the licensed gold dealers in the documentary, is not accounted for, and therefore not part of the legitimate gold rush process that the buyers in the documentary attested to. Those who facilitate illegal activities, including those who claim to be government officials who assist smugglers in smuggling gold out of Zimbabwe, if proven guilty, would be engaged in criminal activity that tarnishes Zimbabwe and its legitimate buyers and should be dealt with accordingly. The problem with the Gold Mafia documentary is that it sought to conflate the legitimate gold rush economy with the illegitimate smuggling, and portray both as one in order to scandalize Zimbabwe gold. We need to make a clear distinction between the two and emphasize that the majority of Zimbabwean gold is sold legitimately in global markets through the gold rush process by dealers who are vetted in both Zimbabwe and Dubai. Some dealers even have anti-money laundering clearances from Dubai. Zimbabwe is doing the most incredible wonders for its country, and for its name to be tarnished in this matter, it is so uncalled for. A statement was released on the 6th of April assuring that the government is indeed taking further steps to investigate the whole Gold Mafia documentary with all the allegations raised in it. They are making sure that they clear out their name out of the whole situation. Zimbabwe and those in the diaspora are behind you. You are not alone. All hail to the Zimbabwean government. Let us leave it there for today, but by asking you, if Al-Jazeera is being used as a decoy by the likes of the BBC and Sky News to propagate the British narrative, knowing clearly that their relationship with Zimbabwe will expose the underhand of the British government. Underhanded journalistic behavior should not go unpunished.
A country that has toppled so many governments in Africa, that has led so many coups in Africa and other parts of the world, a country that has killed so many of our leaders in Africa and other parts of the world, the killers of Patrice Lumumba, those who toppled Kwame Nkrumah, those who killed Nasser, those who killed Muammar Gaddafi, today are coming to teach us about democracy. A country that has been built on brutal force, on enslavement of other human beings, on the humiliation of Africans, the exploitation of Africans, the plunder of Africa, today is coming to teach us about democracy. If you have no respect for the dignity of others, if you have no respect for the sovereignty of other countries, you cannot claim to be a champion of democracy.
Thank you so much for watching till the end. Please do not forget to share your comments all over social media handles. On Twitter, it's at JIT-Entertainment Channel. On Instagram, it's JIT-TV_ZW. And on Facebook, we are JIT-TVzw. Or you can go to our website at www.jit-tv.tv to stream and catch up on all the episodes that you had missed out on. And please do not forget to subscribe for just only 10 Rand a month to watch JIT TV Live TV anywhere in the world, anytime at your own comfort zone. From me, it is time to say goodbye. See you again next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye. Stay entertained.